Hello, my dear friends, and welcome to my reflection on this Anzac Day weekend. Of course, Saturday is Anzac Day, and it's St. Mark's Day, and the Sunday, of course, is Good Shepherd Sunday, where we reflect on Jesus as the Good Shepherd in John 10, verses 1 to 10. Each year, as dawn breaks across Australia on Anzac Day, there is a stillness that settles over the land. Whether at a crowded dawn service or standing quietly in a backyard, we pause, we remember, we listen. We hear again those familiar words, "They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old." In that moment, we are drawn into memory, sacrifice and identity, something deeper than history. But Anzac Day is not simply about war. Ask any returned service person. It's about people, ordinary people who walked into extraordinary danger. It is about courage, loss, and the cost of laying down one's life for others. Into this moment of reflection, Jesus' word from John's Gospel speaks directly to the heart of our remembrance. Jesus says, "I am the good shepherd. I have come that they may have life and have it abundantly." At first glance, the image of a shepherd might seem distant from the harsh realities of Gallipoli or the Western Front, or even the smelly confines of a submarine. Shepherds and soldiers, gentle pastures and brutal battlefields, what on earth could they possibly have in common? But when we listen closely, we hear that Jesus' teaching as the Good Shepherd speaks really to the heart of Anzac Day. Leadership, sacrifice, trust, and most importantly of all, the promise of life. Jesus begins by speaking about the sheep who know the voice of their shepherd. The sheep hear the voice. The shepherd calls their own sheep by name and leads them out, and the sheep follow them because they know their voice. In times of peace, we like to imagine ourselves as independent and self-directed, don't we? But in times of crisis, whether war, grief, COVID, or any other sorts of uncertainty, we discover how deeply we need guidance. We need a voice that we can trust. The soldiers of the Anzac tradition knew this reality well. In the chaos of battle, clarity mattered. Orders had to be trusted. Leadership could mean the difference between life and death. Yet history also reminds us, painfully I think, that not all voices are trustworthy. Not all leadership is wise. Some decisions lead people into impossible situations, into suffering that might be avoided. And this is where Jesus' words cut deeply. He draws a sharp line between the true shepherd who cares for the flock and the thieves and bandits who come not out of care, but to exploit. The contrast is stark. One gives life and the other takes it. And so the question for us is not abstract. It is personal. Whose voice are we going to be listening to? In a world filled with competing voices, political, cultural, personal, Jesus offers himself not as one of many, but as the voice that calls us by name and leads us into eternal life. Jesus says something really curious in this passage. "I am the gate for the sheep." In the ancient world, a shepherd would sometimes lie across the entrance of the sheepfold at night. There was no wooden gate, and the shepherd themselves became the barrier, and nothing could enter or leave without passing through that shepherd. It's a powerful image. The shepherd places themselves between danger and the flock. On Anzac Day, we remember men and women who, in a very real sense, did the same. They stood in the breach. They placed themselves in harm's way for the sake of others, for family, nation, future generations, but also, as many of them will tell you, for their fellow soldiers, sailors, or air people. There is something profoundly Christ-like in that act of self-giving, isn't there? But here we must tread carefully and truthfully. There's an essential difference. The sacrifice of a soldier, sailor, or air person, no matter how noble, is not the same as the sacrifice of Jesus. Military sacrifice is shaped by human brokenness. by conflict, failure and tragedy, whereas Jesus' sacrifice is rooted in redemption and divine purpose. Jesus' sacrifice is different in its source and purpose. He says, the Good Shepherd lays down their life for the sheep, not because they're caught in a conflict that he or she cannot escape, not because of political necessity, but freely, willingly, out of love. The cross is not an accident of history. It's a deliberate self-giving for life. And so while Anzac Day points each of us to the reality of sacrifice, Jesus takes us deeper to the meaning of sacrifice which is fulfilled in him. Jesus then goes on to contrast himself as the Good Shepherd with the hired hand. The hired hand sees the wolf coming and abandons the sheep and runs away because this person does not care for the sheep. The difference is not skill, but commitment. The hired hand is only there present for payment, abandoning the sheep at any threat, whereas the shepherd's relationship is rooted in belonging and loyalty. The sheep belong to the shepherd, and the sheep is theirs. This sharp contrast reveals the degree of care involved. This is where the gospel speaks with uncomfortable honesty. Human institutions, even the best of them, even the church, are marked by mixed motives. There are tensions, nations, armies, and leaders that can all act with courage and integrity, but also with self-interest, fear, or pride. And this contrast shows the double-edged reality of our human leadership. The Anzac story itself contains both heroism and heartbreak, doesn't it? But Jesus presents a different kind of leadership, one that is rooted not in self-preservation, but in self-giving love. Jesus does not run when the danger comes. He does not abandon his people when the cost becomes high. He stays, he protects, he gives. And this matters deeply for each of us today, because many people carry wounds from leaders who have failed them, leaders in public life, in institutions, even in the church. And as a leader in the church, I understand that that also falls to me as well. Trust has been broken. Voices that should have guided have instead harmed. But into that reality, Jesus speaks. I am the Good Shepherd, not a distant authority, not an unreliable guide, but one who knows, who stays, and ultimately who gives. Jesus then goes on to say, perhaps the most striking part of the passage, I came that they may have life and have it to the fullest, or have it abundantly is another translation. It's a surprising statement in the context of Anzac Day, because Anzac Day confronts us with loss, lives cut short, futures unrealised, and families changed forever. So how do we hold together a day of remembrance for the dead with a gospel that speaks of abundant life? Well, I think we do it by recognising that the life Jesus offers is not shallow optimism or denial of suffering. It's a deeper, stronger, more enduring life, one that passes through death and emerges on the other side into eternal life. The story of Jesus does not avoid the shadow of the valley of death. That's in Psalm 23. The story of Jesus enters into it fully. The Good Shepherd does not lead from a distance. He walks into the darkest places, into the suffering, injustice, and even to death itself, and leads his people through. And I think this is where the connection with Anzac Day becomes really profound, because the Anzac story reminds each of us of the cost of the world as it is, a world marked by conflict, sacrifice, and loss. The gospel directs each of us towards God's promised future, a world restored, healed, and alive with hope. Jesus' promise of abundant life stands in the direct contrast to the pain of loss. It's not a denial of what has been lost, but a declaration that loss does not have the final word. Death does not have the final word. The hope that he offers opposes the finality of death. So what does this mean for you and me here and now? Well, I think Anzac Day calls us to remember. That's obvious. And the gospel calls us to follow. That too might be obvious. To remember is to honour the lives lost and the cost of our freedoms, and to carry gratitude forward responsibly. But remembrance alone is not enough. Jesus invites us to go beyond remembrance, to hear the voice of Jesus and to follow Jesus in life. And where does the Good Shepherd lead? Well, certainly not into violence or domination, nor into fear or exclusion. The Good Shepherd leads us into a life marked by love, justice, mercy, but above all, the peace of God which passes all understanding. If we honour Anzac Day's sacrifice, each of us must ask, what kind of world will we build in response? Are we living in a way that reflects the values of courage, self-giving and care for others? Are we listening to the voice of the Good Shepherd in how we treat one another, especially the vulnerable? Are we allowing the Good Shepherd's life to shape our lives? There's one final detail in this passage that I really love. That's easy to miss, but deeply significant. Jesus says, the Good Shepherd, that's Jesus, calls their own sheep by name. In war, in the military, individuals can become numbers, statistics, units, casualties. I still remember my service number off by heart. It was drilled into me. But in the eyes of the Good Shepherd, no one is anonymous. Each person is known and valued. Every life is remembered on Anzac Day. Every story, every loss is held within the knowledge of God. And so are you and me. In a world that can feel impersonal and overwhelming, this is a quiet but powerful truth. Each of us are known, not as part of a crowd, not as a number, but by name. And the one who knows you and me is the one who lays down their life for you and for me. So standing amid both Anzac Day and the Gospel, you and me are called to a deeper understanding. We remember sacrifice, but we also look to the one whose sacrifice brings life. We honour courage, but we follow the one whose courage leads through death into resurrection. We reflect on voices that have led in the past, but we listen for the voice that calls each of us still today. I am the Good Shepherd. I came that they may have life. So may we remember with gratitude. May we listen with discernment, and may we follow with trust. For the shepherd who calls us by name is the shepherd who leads us into eternal life, abundant and enduring life, filled with hope. Lest we forget, DBF, the Lord be with you.